Alright, this is what we got going on here. I bought this weed whacker. The guy gave me a new carb with it and everything, and he said he couldn't get it to start and blah blah. I'd have to adjust some nonsense and this and that the old carb was bad and whatever. Well, I ended up taking this thing apart a million times, wasting a bunch of money on parts that I didn't need, and the weird thing was I had spark, but it wasn't like the biggest, greatest spark ever. But there was still spark and I could feel it. And I figured maybe I wasn't getting like good enough spark, or I had bad compression or something like that. So I was going to take the head off and try to get a new ring for it and put a ring on the piston. Well, luckily before I did any of that, like after taking it apart a million times, messing with all the wiring, making sure everything's grounded out and all that, I ended up having a timing issue, which I don't know how I could have had a timing issue, but when it would spark off, the piston was all the way down, which anybody knows that with any motor, if the piston's not up and it sparks, it can't ignite the fuel, and then it's not going to shove the piston down. So that was my problem. Like, and it's weird because it's got like a keyway for the I guess it would be the flywheel on here with the magnets on it. And I took it off and I put it back on from before, and it was on there. So I don't know how it would have spun, but it spun on there somehow. And it was probably like that the whole time that the timing was off. And for most people that end up having spark and having a new carburetor, you should definitely probably check your timing to make sure your pistons, for the most part, all the way up at the top, when the magnets are like magnetized on the flywheel. You can kind of feel it like when you pull it. I would say like when you're like if you pull it, like you can feel the magnets kind of catch, and it'll stop like in there. So whenever those magnets catch, your piston should be all the way up at the top. All you gotta do is just pop off your spark plug, look down in there and make sure your piston's all the way up and everything's in time. Or you can just take all the pieces off it and just make sure that for sure that it's in time. But that's probably a major issue with a lot of these weed whackers. Like, I was gonna throw this thing in the garbage. I was so pissed off because I just couldn't figure it out. And forever and ever and ever, and like I ended up checking the compression, and I would assume that you would probably want to buy the right compression gauge for something like this, like a smaller engine. I'm sure that because what I used was just, I think it was a regular car one. It was one of these. I got it off of eBay or some shit, and you do not want to use one of these because it'll give you a totally inaccurate reading. When I checked one of my good weed whackers that I had, like this old ass one that I got from some old lady that tried to rip me off. It was like it's this Ryobi one. It's like some 31cc fucking nonsense. But this thing had worse compression than this one, and it ran great. So I was like, well, it definitely isn't the compression. So I figured it was something electrical, and I just went through a ton of things, and it just ended up being the timing was off. So usually when you have spark and you know the carburetor is good, there's something else wrong. It's either the compression, but even I would think with the shitty compression and even a bad carburetor, it should still run. It would just run really, really shitty. But it would be like underpowered if it had no bad compression at least. And if the carb was bad, it just wouldn't rev up probably. But it should still run theoretically. But that was the problem. I ended up having a timing issue, and I'm sure a lot of weed whackers and stuff, small engines, get thrown away because the timing's off and nobody knows like what the problem is. I read so many threads about like what could be the problem. There's spark and a new carb and everything, but like nobody could figure out why their engine wasn't running, and it's most likely because your piston's all the way down to the bottom when you're sparking off. So that's something that you should really check out when you are ending up having problems and everything's pretty much brand new. Just check the timing.